A long time ago, there was a demon called the Redcoat who supposedly lived in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. People believed this demon thrived on live animal sacrifices and had the power to create evil individuals. Oh, and he could also grant the gift of a long life. Sounds like a sketchy trade deal, right? As these tales spread, so did the number of sacrifices. One day, we witnessed the disturbing sight of a deer feasting on another deer. Cannibalism much? And then we see a blood-soaked girl hanging from a tree. Talk about a forest that's auditioning for a horror movie cameo. Fast forward to the present day, where we meet Runnels, a charming villain, Reed, a grade-A jerk, trying to scare a man into giving up his land. When the man refuses, Runnels throws a tantrum, like a toddler who didn't get his candy, and kills him. Wow! Runnels, was negotiation too mainstream for you? His body is dumped like trash, and we move on. 3 months later, the story shifts to a school bus carrying kids. We hear on the radio that animals in the area are dying, and everyone is blaming it on the Redcoat. Inside the bus, we meet Edward, the son of the man Runnels killed earlier. Edward smiles at his friend Rachel, which for some reason annoys another boy who starts bullying him. Really, bully boy? Someone smiles, and you go full keyboard warrior? Edward's family is introduced next. His mother is Na Loi, and his younger sister is Emily. They're a Chinese immigrant family living near the forest. They were often targeted by the townsfolk because, racism, and were treated like outsiders. The town clearly had nothing better to do than be collectively awful. One night, Runnels and his gang decide to attack the Loi family. Their plan, however, is hilariously thwarted when the family dog, Sam, starts barking and wakes everyone up. Good job, Runnels' gang, outsmarted by a dog. Na and Edward head outside, where Edward knocks one of the attackers unconscious. Turns out, Na is no pushover either. She's a single mom holding her family together like a boss. Later, Edward and Na take the injured man into their house to treat him. Edward is suspicious, thinking he might be one of Runnels' henchmen, or, worse, connected to the Redcoat. Na insists on helping him, though, because she's a decent human being. That night, Edward starts having weird dreams about the injured man, seeing visions of the same blood-soaked girl hanging from a tree. Classic horror movie trope alert. If someone is creepy, they're bound to have creepier dreams. The next day, Emily was playing doctor with the injured man. Honestly, Emily, treating a grown man as your patient when you don't even know what a stethoscope is? Bold move. Na caught her, quickly chased him away, and locked the door. Meanwhile, Edward went to check on the injured man. As he approached, he heard loud, heavy breathing coming from the room. When he opened the door, the man looked like he was on death's doorstep and weakly asked Edward for fresh blood. Oh, great. Just what Edward needed. A vampire wannabe patient. Startled, Edward left the room but forgot to lock the door. Good job, Edward. You had one job, won. In the next scene, we see Na shopping in town for medicine and household items when, surprise, surprise, Runnels starts harassing her again. This time, he takes it up a notch by making disgusting, racist, and lewd remarks. Runnels clearly has a PhD in being the worst human alive, but Na wasn't afraid of him. She was from a city full of law schools, theaters, and universities, and she wasn't about to let this backwoods bully intimidate her. Runnels, besides being a local big shot, was a massive racist who wanted to kick the Loi family and other immigrants out of town. His family had gained respect because of his father's contributions to the country, but Runnels? This guy wasn't even worthy of being respected by a houseplant. Here's the kicker. Edward's school friend Rachel, whom we saw earlier on the bus, was none other than Runnels' only daughter. Talk about awkward friendships. Oh, and to make matters worse, Runnels' mother fully supported her son's villainy and was just as racist as him. It's a family tradition, apparently. After Runnels' men failed in their earlier attack on the Loi family, they went back to report to him. Furious at their incompetence, Runnels ordered them to kill the Loi family's dog. Wow, Runnels. You can't win against humans, so now you're picking fights with dogs? Impressive. Edward arrived home just in time and found Emily playing. He rushed over to check and saw her with the same injured stranger. The stranger threatened Edward and demanded fresh blood again. Edward, trying to avoid trouble, killed a chicken and gave its blood to the man, who drank it eagerly. The man guzzled it like it was a morning protein shake. Gross. In the next scene, Runnels was trying to convince his ailing mother to come to his house because her health was worsening. She revealed she wanted to spend her last moments at a bar because, apparently, margaritas make for a great farewell party. The next morning, a police officer showed up at the Loi family's house, claiming he was there to take their dog due to some made-up case. Clearly, this officer was on Runnels' payroll. Na and Edward fought back, refusing to let their dog go. Just then, the injured stranger stepped in, threatening the officer. When the officer pulled out his gun, the stranger swiftly disarmed him, scaring him away. The officer ran like he just saw his ex at the mall. Later, the officer lied to Runnels, saying the Loi family hadn't cooperated and shifted all the blame onto the Redcoat. But Reynolds didn't believe in the redcoat and even made fun of the whole idea. His mother, however, scolded him and told him about the demon. She explained that the redcoat had lived in the area for centuries, feeding on fear and sacrifices from the locals. The more people feared him, the stronger he became. Sacrifices were made to keep him away, but no one had ever defeated him. In other words, the redcoat was a local celebrity no one wanted to meet. Edward goes back to donate blood to the stranger again, and surprise, surprise, this guy only survives on blood. Doesn't matter if it's chicken, goat, or maybe even ketchup mixed with water. He just needs it to stay alive. After drinking the blood, the stranger starts getting those creepy visions again of some girl. Meanwhile, Yan's family discovers Sam's body the next morning. He was killed so brutally that it was obvious who did it. Yep, you guessed it, Reynolds. Looks like he decided, if the police are useless, I'll just be the neighborhood villain myself. Wow, Reynolds, way to make Worst Neighbor of the Year a lifetime achievement. Yen is heartbroken and starts praying, but Edward consoles her because apparently he's not just a blood donor. He's a part-time therapist now. The stranger, trying to be helpful for once, helps bury Sam. Later, Edward asks the stranger for help in defeating Reynolds, hinting that he's ready to take drastic measures. As night falls, the stranger, whose name we finally learn is John Fallon, heads to Reynolds' mom's bar. Now here comes the juicy part. Fallon was once a police officer, or more precisely a deputy. Turns out, years ago, he had a run-in with Reynolds and his mom when he tried to investigate them. Back then, Reynolds and his mom didn't just act like villains. They auditioned for the role of evil masterminds and nailed it. They humiliated Fallon and kicked him out like he was some door-to-door salesman selling expired vacuum cleaners. Cut to the present. Fallon sneaks into Reynolds' mom's room and tampers with her 4-tube. He doesn't stop there. He scares her so badly she probably thought she was in a live horror movie. And then, like clockwork, Redcoat appears and takes out Reynolds' mom for good. Meanwhile, Fallon goes back home, where Yen shares her past struggles. She talks about how her husband had the classic American dream of becoming a farmer, but life had other plans. Fallon, clearly uncomfortable with emotions, tells her to relax and sits down to guard the house. Fallon might be good at fighting monsters, but comforting people? That's not on his resume. We're then thrown into Fallon's backstory from 10 years ago. Reynolds and his mom once kidnapped Fallon and his wife, tied them to a tree, and left them to die. Let's just say, Reynolds and his mom could give masterclasses on being horrible human beings. After escaping, Fallon was cursed and ended up with a demonic hand. Because clearly, this guy's life wasn't dramatic enough. Back in the present, Yen wakes up to see Fallon fixing their tractor, like he's the local handyman now. At school, Edward gets into a fight with his bully and gets hurt. Fallon, still mourning his wife, notices Edward's injury when he gets home. Edward vents his anger, but Fallon gives him a reality check. Stand up to your bullies, kid. You're the main character. Start acting like one. Reynolds is shown sitting on his mother's casket, looking all sad and mopey. Honestly, he's acting like a tragic hero, but let's not forget he's a guy who literally ruins lives. While sulking, he hears strange noises outside the window. Curious and annoyed, he steps out of the room and demands answers from a police officer about Fallon. The officer, clearly not interested, tells Reynolds he thinks the whole Fallon thing is nonsense because it happened 10 years ago. Reynolds' face at this point could have been captioned, "When you know you're the villain but nobody takes you seriously." His anger boils over, and he decides to handle Fallon himself. The officer, however, has his doubts. The guy's supposed to be dead. Did Fallon come with a zombie membership card or something? But Reynolds doesn't care. He storms out, finds Fallon grieving at his wife's grave, and attacks him from behind. Reynolds throws a punch, but Fallon casually snaps his neck like it's a light chore. Reynolds came for revenge but ended up as a lesson in how not to pick a fight. We flash back to 10 years ago, where we learn that Fallon was saved by the Red Court, a fancy name for vampires or, let's be real, Dracula's PR rebrand. The Red Court gave Fallon its blood, which turned him into an immortal who has to drink fresh blood to survive. Since then, Fallon has been anything but normal, which explains why he couldn't help the Loy family properly. Let's face it, Fallon's basically the moody anti-hero who comes with more baggage than an airport terminal. Back in the present, Fallon regains consciousness alone, while Reynolds stumbles off somewhere, feeling all weird. He ends up at a bar, orders a drink, and realizes it tastes awful, an obvious sign he's also turning into a vampire. Congratulations, Reynolds. You're finally joining the Supernatural Club. Too bad there's no membership jacket. Meanwhile, Fallon heads home with blood still on his face. Smooth move, Fallon. Yen notices it and questions him, but Fallon brushes it off with a lie and escapes to his room. At his mother's funeral, Reynolds gives a fiery speech, blaming immigrants for all the chaos. Because clearly, when your life falls apart, blaming random people is the ultimate coping mechanism. His speech takes an odd turn when he starts ranting about the Red Court, losing his temper completely. Fallon, who's secretly attending the funeral, watches from a distance, realizing he might have made a mistake letting Reynolds live. Fallon returns home and urges Yen to run away for her safety. She agrees and prepares to leave. Emily takes her in the car, but then we see Edward on a bus. He gets off and, unlucky as ever, encounters his bully. The bully, now armed with a knife, chases him. Rachel tries to warn Edward, but the bully catches up and attacks. In a chaotic turn of events, Rachel jumps in to protect Edward. During the scuffle, she gets stabbed in the stomach, and the cowardly bully runs away. Honestly, what kind of bully brings a knife to a fight and still manages to lose the moral high ground? Hearing Edward's cries, Fallon and Yen rush to him, but they can't save Rachel. Edward is heartbroken by Rachel's death, and seeing her reminds Fallon of his wife. This triggers a flashback to when Fallon first became a vampire. At that time, his wife was killed, and Fallon buried her properly, even making a cross in her honor. Back in the present, Fallon takes out that same cross with one goal in mind: to kill Reynolds. Fallon's revenge plan really says, I might be undead, but my grudges are eternal. Meanwhile, Michael starts hunting for Reynolds and comes across the bully who had killed Rachel, now lying dead. It's revealed that Reynolds is behind this, but instead of saving the bully, Fallon lets him die because of all the terrible things he did, including tormenting Edward. Let's be honest, though. This bully went from I own the streets to the streets own me real fast. Fallon heads out to find Reynolds and asks the officer for his location. The officer, clearly scared out of his wits, spills the beans without hesitation. Meanwhile, Reynolds has kidnapped the Loy family and is keeping them in a factory. In a fit of madness, he brutally kills his own partner. Because when you're evil and losing it, the first logical step is murder your sidekick. Great plan, Reynolds. He confronts Mr. Loy, claiming Rachel's death has driven him insane. His temper is out of control, and he's ready to destroy the Loy family. But just when things seem dire, Edward sneaks up and attacks Reynolds from behind. Using the distraction, he grabs Emily and runs away, hiding her in a cupboard. Edward then bravely confronts Reynolds. Props to Edward for stepping up, but let's not forget this is the same guy who couldn't outrun a bully last week. Reynolds is about to kill Yen when Fallon arrives and attacks him with the cross he made years ago. The attack leaves Reynolds badly injured, allowing the Loy family to escape. Fallon drags the injured Reynolds away, taking him to the very tree where his wife was killed. Fallon pulls fuel from his car and sprays it everywhere. He then grabs Reynolds, lights a fire, and sets them both ablaze. Reynolds starts off scared, because let's face it, burning alive isn't on anyone's bucket list, but eventually he accepts his fate, even holding Fallon's hand. The fiery end for both Fallon and Reynolds isn't random. They knew they had been transformed into creatures of the Red Court and didn't want to live that way. They couldn't be killed in a normal way, so Fallon chose to end it for both of them. Fallon essentially said, if I have to deal with Reynolds one more day, I'd rather burn, and honestly, who can blame him? As the flames die down, we see the Loy family paying tribute to Mr. Loy and all the others who lost their lives. And with that, the movie ends with a mix of heartbreak, closure, and a bit of fiery justice. Boom! Moral of the story: don't mess with Fallon unless you want to end up as a vampire kebab.